Hey guys, welcome to my channel Sengupta's Creation. I am Yona Sengupta, your host and your coach, and today we will be doing the second part of friction. This topic is a very interesting topic, and we will do the second part. We'll do the types of frictions in this class as we have done in our previous classes, that what is friction and what causes friction we have both done, and today we will be learning about day 2 types of friction. Okay, so I think we can start. Comes, just a second. Okay, now friction. Now when it comes to friction, there are four types of main frictions. The first one is rolling friction, next is sliding friction, next is fluid friction, and next is the static friction, as you can all see. First, we'll start with our static friction. Now, as you can see in this slide, that what is static friction? A static friction is the frictional force that comes into play until an object starts moving is called a the static friction. Okay, next, this is an object that has to overcome the static friction to force in order to start the movement. Okay, okay, I hope you are understanding whatever I am saying. Next comes is sliding friction. Now what is sliding friction? Let me tell you. Now sliding friction is that since the rolling sliding friction is comes to play whenever an object moves along the surface of another object. So such a movement is called slide, and hence sliding friction is the force that opposes the movement or slide of an object. So sliding is replaced in most machines by rolling by the use of ball bearings. So common examples are So, common examples are the use of ball bearings between hubs and the axis of ceiling fans and bicycles, right? Isn't it? Next is the rolling friction. So, what is rolling friction? Now, when one body rolls over the surface of another body, the resistance to its motion is called as rolling friction. Now rolling reduces friction, and it is always easier to roll than to slide a body over another. So that is the reason it is convenient to pull luggage fitted with rollers. Now, can we understand that why the wheel is said to be one of the greatest inventions of mankind? Yes. Next, we'll move on to the fluid friction. Just a second, let me check. Fluid friction. Here comes. Fluid friction. Okay. Okay. In this fluid friction, we know that the air is very light and thin. So, yet what happens? It exerts frictional force on objects moving through it. So, similarly, water and other liquids exert force of friction when objects move through them, right? So, in science, the common name of gases and liquids is fluids. And so we can say that fluids exert force of friction on objects in motion. We will read one by one thoroughly. Okay? Okay. Now, here are some questions. Next. Now, we always need to remember that rolling friction is the smallest. Leave fluid friction, the three main types: static friction, rolling friction, sliding friction. Now, rolling friction is the smallest, then the biggest is the static friction. The most amount of the force of friction is more in static friction, and then comes the sliding friction, and then the rolling friction. It has the lowest force of friction. Okay, here is a picture. You can see that here is no motion, and here is static friction of force, and here is sliding. Here, sliding motion is also there. Yes. So here comes the static friction. Next, you can see that the rolling motion of or the force is going, and from the opposite comes the rolling friction. Next, here in the next picture, you can see that motion through air is there and air friction comes. Next, motion through water is there, viscous friction comes. These two are not there, but still. Okay. Next. Next, we will move on to the advantages of frictional force. What are the advantages? Now, as you can see, that frictional force is very necessary for various reasons or purposes in our daily lives, such as are these? It is, for example, it can, it allows us to walk on the earth's surface. It allows us to write with a pen on a surface or a paper. It allows us to fix a nail in the wall, or a moving object would never be able to come to the state of rest without the frictional force, and it would be would not be possible to drive any automobiles on the roads without the friction force. So it would not be possible to light a matchstick by rubbing it against the match box if there is no friction. So these are some of them. So these are the types of friction that we read today. Okay. Here I'll show you, this is the advantages, and here is the picture of striking a matchstick, spiked shoes of cricket players. Then there is, we are able to drive automobiles, cars, vehicles, writing on the paper. If not, there is, if there is no friction, we won't be able to write with the pen. We not will not be able to pick up the pen. These are the advantages of frictional force. Now if you have any questions, you can ask me. I will wait. Okay, since there is no question, I will start with the next topic. Before that, there is some video links. You can take a screenshot. You can watch them. This is the PPT link, and here comes the assignment. Some questions. Now, first is define static friction, sliding friction, rolling friction, and fluid friction. These four, which we just taught, and also to explain advantages of friction in our daily lives. Now, does air exert friction on a moving object moving through it? Explain with examples. These are some of the questions. Now please see if you can solve them. I will give you some moment. Okay, so it ends here. As you can see, just a second. Just a second. Okay. Oh, I hope you can see the video. Now here ends the day 2 explanation. Okay, and today we'll start the day 3 also. Okay, here comes the disadvantages of frictional force. Now, what are the disadvantages of frictional force? Let me tell you. Now, friction causes wastage of energy, and this is because any object that moves has to overcome the force of friction, right? Now, frictional force results in wear and tear of objects, such as the moving parts of a machine. So, the tires of a vehicle, sole of the in the shoes, etc., are some examples of wear and tear of objects, frictional force. Now, these are the disadvantages. Now, here you can see all the things, I guess. No, it's okay. Now, I want you all to recall some of your experiences. Okay, now is it easy to hold a kulhar? Kulhar is earthen pot or a glass tumbler. Suppose the outer surface of the tumbler is greasy or has a thin layer of cooking oil on it. Would it become easier or more difficult to hold it? Now just think, now would it be possible to hold the glass at all if there is no friction? Now recall also how difficult it is to move on a wet muddy track or wet marble floor. Can you imagine being able to walk at all if there were no friction? Now imagine these are the questions which will lead you to the answer of frictional force, disadvantages of frictional force, which friction is a necessary evil in our lives. right? Okay. Now we could not write with pen or pencil if there is no friction, right? So we were talking about these are the advantages of frictional force. But on the other hand, there is friction is also an evil. Disadvantages are also there, right? So, for example, it wears out the materials, whether they are screws, ball bearings, or soles of, shoes. You must have seen worn out steps of food over bridges at railway stations. Friction can also, produce heat. In the third, what do I say? In the third, this one, production of heat. Friction can also produce heat. Vigorously rub your palms together for a few minutes. What will happen? What will we feel? What will it feel? Right. And when we, strike a matchstick against the rough surface, it catches fire, right? Isn't it? I think there is a picture. There should be. I don't know why there is not. Okay. Though we will move on to the next, which is, for example, you might have observed that the jar of a mixture becomes hot when it runs, isn't it? For a few minutes. And you can cite various other examples in which friction produces heat, isn't it? So, in fact, when a machine is operated, heat generated cause much, much wastage wastage of energy here. It is wastage of energy comes. So we shall discuss on ways how we can minimize friction in the following section or following chapter. Okay, then there is noise pollution also. Yes, in certain cases. Okay, this is a picture, I hope you can see, of you see more forces required to write, then wear and tear of materials, then causes noise pollution, causes fire in forest. These are the disadvantages of frictional force. Now we shall discuss the ways of minimizing friction in the following chapter, right? So here comes how can we reduce friction or minimize friction here. As friction, as you can see, is okay, sorry, as we have seen in the previous section, in the previous chapters, that friction is desirable in some situations, right? As friction is due to roughness of surfaces. Any process that makes the con- contact surfaces smooth will reduce friction, isn't it? Just a second. Now, the first topic is by polishing, isn't it? Now, have you ever thought, for example, why is the sole of your shoe is grooved? Is it, done to provide the shoes better grip on the floor so that they can move safely. Similarly, the threaded tires of cars, trucks, and bulldozers provide better grip with the ground. Okay, so by polishing, what happens? The powder which is sprinkled over the uh, you know, carom board to decrease the friction because the board surface and between the board surface and the striker. So in this way, the surface of the carom board becomes smooth. Right now, we have might have noticed that when a few drops of oil is poured on the hinges of the door moves smoothly. A bicycle of a motor mechanic, just a second, as you can see here. Then a bicycle, a motor mechanic uses grease between the moving parts of these machines. So in all the cases, we want to reduce friction in order to increase efficiency. Now, as you can see that when oil or grease or graphite is applied between the moving part of a machine, a thin layer is formed there, and moving surfaces do not directly rub against each other. Okay, so here comes the by lubrication. How can we reduce or minimize friction? It is also by lubrication, which I was talking, that the surfaces do not directly, you know, rub against each other. So interlocking of irregularities is avoided to a great extent, and movement becomes smooth. So the substances which reduce friction are known as, or are called, lubricants. So in some machines, it may not be advisable to use oil as lubricant. So an air cushion between the moving parts is used to reduce friction, isn't it? Yes. Okay. Now this is the picture of pouring oil or lubricant in a machine. Okay, next we'll move on to the topic directly, is that by using wheels and ball bearings, the rolling friction. We are coming towards rolling friction right now. Now, we must have seen attaches and other pieces of luggage fitted with rollers. Even a child can pull such pieces of luggage, right? But why is it so? We will find out in this topic which we are going to study today. Okay, okay. So you see, we know that when a substance rolls on over a surface, rolling friction is produced, which resists its motion on the surface. So, however, its magnitude is lesser, as you can see. Okay, and wheels are circulating objects that turn around a center point. Now, the wheels allow an object to roll over a surface rather than allowing them to slide over the surface. Now, this results in less friction and hence easy to movement of the object, isn't it? Now, we can take another example, isn't it? We can take another example. For example, that we can take a few pencils which are cylindrical in shape and place them parallel to each other on a table. Now we need to place a thick book over it. Now we need to push the book. Now what we will observe? We will observe the pencils rolling as the book moves. Now, do we feel it easier to move the book in this way than to slide it? Now, do we think do you think that resistance to the motion of the book has been reduced? Have you ever, seen heavy machinery being moved by placing logs under it? Yes. So, this is what so hence we can know that when one body rolls over the surface of another body, the resistance to its motion is known as rolling friction. This is what we are talking about, rolling friction. Now, rolling friction is also used in the parts of machines that are moving continuously. So in this way, you can also see that about the sliding friction. Now, the sliding friction, since rolling friction is smaller than the sliding friction, I have already told you that first is the static friction, then the rolling friction, and then the sliding friction. Okay, so since the rolling friction is smaller than the sliding friction, sliding is replaced in most machines by rolling by the use of ball bearings. Now, common examples are the use of ball bearings between hubs and the axes of ceiling fans. Now we are talking about ball bearings. Now, what is this ball bearing? Let us see. Yes, here you see this is known as a ball bearing. Okay. Okay, so this is the ball bearings. This part, this small parts are the ball bearings, and this are the turning cylinders. What we call. So this is what we call as ball bearings. Okay. Next, what will we move on? We will move on to fluid friction. Now, as you can see, we'll move on to by streamlining to reduce fluid friction. Now, what are these? Now, I have already told you that in science, the common, you know, here, this is the picture. Now, I have already told you that in science, the common name of gases and liquids is fluids. So we can say that fluids exert force of friction on objects in motion through them. So the frictional force exerted by fluids is also called as drag. Right, so the frictional force that fluids exert on objects is called uh, drag, isn't it? This is what we are talking about, by streamlining to reduce fluid friction. Next comes is the amount of frictional force by a fluid on an object depends upon the following. What are those? here. The first topic, so the first point is that the speed of the object with respect to the fluid. Number two, the nature of the fluid, its viscosity or its tendency to resist the flow, isn't it? Now, this viscosity, what is this? In water, there is also a type of friction, isn't it? So, that type of friction is known as viscosity. Okay. The next point is that the shape of the object. What is the shape of the object? So that we can, so this is what we are calling. So in total, we want to say that the frictional force on an object in a fluid depends on its speed with respect to the fluid, and the frictional force also depends on the shape of the object and the nature of the fluid. This is very easy, isn't it? Next, you see that here friction is minimum. I'm sorry, friction is minimum for a streamlined shape which is rounded in the front and narrows the back. Okay, so we understand now the nature, you know, the nature has given birds and fish streamlined bodies, isn't it? Yes. So next point comes that the bodies of aeroplanes, and missiles or rockets, cars are streamlined to reduce the friction with air. So it is known as air resistance. In total, what I want to say is that it is very obvious that when objects move through fluids, they have to overcome friction acting on them, right? So in this process, they will, they lose energy. Efforts are therefore made to minimize friction, is equal to minimizing friction. So objects are given special shapes. Now, where do we think scientists get hints for these special shapes? Now, from nature, of course, then birds and fishes have to move um, about in fluids all the time. Their bodies must have evolved to shapes which would make them lose energy in overcoming friction. Now, we have also read in our previous classes about these shapes. Okay, now what we need to do is look very carefully at this